Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the hours of delays at our Brexit borders again, as holidaymakers try to flee the island, getting blocked by Brexit red tape for the second time in as many months. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. But Phil, the Brexiteers cry this is an IT failure. It's not Brexit. Yeah, the IT failure probably isn't Brexit, in all honesty. But the thing is, you have to ask, so why is this IT system needed? And what is the plan B compared with being in the EU? That is the Brexit question. That is what you have to ask yourself. Now, it is worth, first of all, pointing out that there are multiple IT failures here around airports. There's been an internal IT failure with British Airways, for example, which is entirely down to them. Nothing to do with Brexit for definite, nothing to do with the government. That just affects BA passengers. But there's been other ones as well. And there's been a UK government IT failure, which has played merry hell with people trying to get through passport control, regardless of which company's planes they wish to get on. And I don't know if the border control failure is because the Tories got Dodgy Dave down the pub to implement a substandard IT system, or if they're too cheap to pay for enough staff to maintain it during the busy period, or if it's just one of those things and should hardly ever happen again. I saw a suggestion that because there have been multiple IT failures around Europe, not just in the UK, maybe it's a cyber attack. That's possible. I have no idea. I am not remotely knowledgeable enough to be able to answer the question as to why the Border Force IT system collapsed. What I do know is that how we're having to deal with it now and how we would have dealt with it as EU members is very different. Because as EU members, first, that should be straightforward. Everyone would be diverted from the e-gates, which aren't working, towards manual passport control, which is, of course, what's happening anyway. But all staff would have had to do if we were in the EU was go, oh, yes, that's your passport. Off you go. That's all we needed. We just needed proof that we were UK citizens, or that the people who were trying to flee the island were UK citizens. Okay, if you were a citizen of, say, the US or Canada or something, yes, you're going to do it the long way. But UK citizens, the bulk of people trying to get through Heathrow would have just gone, I am an EU citizen. There you go. That would be it. Quick glance, on your way. Really, no slower than an e-gate, really. But now that we're not EU citizens, except for those with an Irish passport, of course, there's a slightly modified procedure. As third country citizens, we're only allowed to be in the EU for 90 days out of every 180. So after passport controllers check that you are the owner of the passport, which doesn't take that long, they have to check that your visit is not going to put you over that 90-day limit. Then they have to check that your passport is valid for long enough. Not enough for it to be valid. It's got to be valid for long enough. Now, the time you need left on your passport can vary because individual EU countries, because they're sovereign and all that, have the right to determine that to an extent. But the EU generally says you should have 3 months left. Again, if we were EU citizens, that wouldn't matter. We just needed to prove that we're EU citizens. That's all the passport's there for, to prove we're an EU citizen. Beyond that, they don't care. So once all of these extra checks have taken place, the passport needs stamping. Now, this is so that your time in the EU can be logged for not only your return, but future travel in the same 180-day period. And all of this takes considerably longer than quick scan through the e-gate. And if the whole process doesn't sound like it takes that long for one person, you think, well, for one person, that's all right. I don't mind an extra minute in the queue. Consider the extra time being added on for the many tens of thousands of people trying to get through. Heathrow alone gets an average of about 120 to 130,000 people a day on average throughout the year. But this weekend's a busy one. It's the traditional May holiday week getaway. This is why there are severe delays at the airports. And then our friend Michael, I've mentioned him before, he spotted he's from a safe distance. He's well out of this mess. But he spotted a couple of good points as well. So someone posted on Twitter a passport queue in Milan, which was also, being delayed due to, in this particular case, the pointing out a carnet check. Now, this is for people traveling essentially for professional purposes, but with equipment, expensive equipment. It's to make sure they don't have to pay duties on their kit, because it's their kit. Yes, they're taking it into another customs area, but then they intend to bring it back. So they don't want to be paying customs on it. It's their stuff. But you have to fill out detailed paperwork for it, and the paperwork needs check-in. So imagine if something like this is occurring. You just need your passport checking, but you're stuck there. Someone's having their carnet checked. Imagine that. And that can take some time. Imagine that. As well as if it was happening, not in Milan, but if some of that's happening in Heathrow today as well. Tens of thousands of travellers needing to get their passports manually checked and stamped because the e-gates are knackered. And there are a few people in the mix who need their carnet documents checking. It can take like an hour. But it's not just the airports where there's a problem. We've got issues at the seaports as well, related to the same IT failure, of course, because it's also screwing up things for the French officials at Dover. And Michael again copied one of the M20 cameras. Now, it shows a queue of vehicles. Now, often it'll show a queue of vehicles, but you can tell it's a standing queue because there's a couple of people that have left their cabs on this warm, May Saturday. Well, warm for us anyway. And we're just having a chat by a traffic cone. So obviously nothing's moving. Then someone I saw tweet that Dover seemed to be prioritising the lorries because they were the only vehicles moving at all. So prioritising freight over tourists, as I guess they have to. And the problems we have with exporting fresh food since Brexit. I was talking about that recently. Imagine how much worse that is at times like this. Because it already takes too long to get there because of you've got to sort out all the paperwork before you can even get the lorry on the road. You've got to make sure you're sorted out with the customs system. Then you've got to get yourself to Dover. You might be diverted. Well, get into Kent, you might be diverted to the lorry park first. Then delays getting through Dover, all that. So it's already a problem getting fresh food across as it is. And you imagine a day like today when it might be delayed way longer. So it's not fresh at the end of it, so then it's no use. And it just makes our exporting businesses less reliable to EU customers. Because it already takes now a long time for us to export something to the EU. But it could randomly take longer. It could just take longer. It could be like, you're ordering from them for a few months and it's taking this long. Well, that's a bit long, but okay. Then all of a sudden it takes a lot longer and it's like, well, that's no good to me now. So it means those EU customers will be more motivated at times like this they'll just try and find an alternative supply within their own market. Much more of this, and you'd think the only things we'll be able to export are products that only we make. So it's either you do that, you get them from us, or you get them from nowhere, or those that are in such desperate demand the rest of the EU cannot meet that demand. This is all a proper shit show. And although ministers will no doubt be making more piss poor excuses on the Sunday morning interview round tomorrow, IT failure, nothing to do with us. It's like, no, this is actually down to politics. It's not just about the IT failure. And again, I don't know that the IT failure is not their fault. It could still be their fault for not designing it properly or for not investing enough people to manage it properly. If it is a cyber attack, maybe there's an argument that they should have had better cybersecurity. But maybe it's not their fault. Maybe even a cyber attack is not their fault. But the plan B is. What's the plan B? Why is your plan B so bad? Yes, you might sometimes get delays before Brexit as well on really busy days. But it would be for that day, and it would be a few days in the year. And even then, the delays weren't as bad as this. But these are not one-offs now. When it happens over several days. At Easter, so the first time in the year when there's going to be a lot of people trying to flee the island, that's at Easter. We had massive delays that lasted for days. Now it's the May bank holiday. This is the second. It's not like we've skipped one and one was okay. This is the second time in the year, this May bank holiday and half-term week, when a lot of people flee the island. And it's perfectly normal at this time of year. And we have the same delays caused by a different thing. And I say, never mind the nonsense about an IT failure, and whether it's the government's fault or whether it's not the government's fault, whether it's Brexit's fault, whether it's not Brexit's fault. It could be that it is the government's fault. Maybe they've just designed it to cope for normal times, like they did with the NHS. Design the capacity for the lowest demand because it works out cheaper. And then you're knackered when demand's higher. But the reason we have these massive delays is not just because an IT system failed. It's because the plan B was rubbish. Because when the IT system doesn't work, we made the process of having our passports checked more complex. In the past, it was a quick wave of the passport in front of someone's face. You know, it's pretty much as quick to do that as to get an e-gate to scan it. It takes longer when it has to be checked for things like expiry dates, time already spent in the EU, and then be stamped. And we only need that because of Brexit. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.